Good morning or good afternoon, Tigers. For this video, unfortunately not at a Starbucks, but I will gladly report to you that I've had 3 cups of coffee today and they were all amazing. Alright, so this video is going to be on geometry. And this is going to be on the geometry portion of your spring break homework. Something I want you guys to note from the previous video that was at the very end. So if you didn't watch it to the very end, you probably missed this. Very good news for you. So if you look at your spring break homework, there are 45 questions total. If you look at the chart, 45 questions. You are allowed to skip 2 questions per unit. So for instance, expressions and equations is, let's see, they're numbers 1 through 12. So you are allowed to skip 2 of those questions. So you only have to do 10 of those. For geometry, you are only required to do 13 through 23, but you are allowed to skip 2. For ratios and proportions, the numbers are 24 through 34. You are allowed to skip 2. For ratios and proportions, for statistics and probability, you have numbers 35 through 45. You're allowed to skip 2. So you are allowed to skip a total of 8, and 2 have to be from the same unit. You cannot skip 8 geometry questions. You can only skip 2 from geometry, 2 from expressions and equations, 2 for ratios and proportions, and 2 for statistics and probability. If you wish to not skip any and do all of them, I will see to it that you get extra credit. It's not going to be that much, so don't stress yourself out. Just skip 2 from each unit. Alright, so for geometry, you have to remember 2 terms. You have to remember your complementary and supplementary angles. And complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees. 90 degrees. And supplementary angles are angles that add up to 180 degrees. So when it's asking you, what is a complementary angle to, let's say it has a question like this. Okay? And it's asking you, what's a complementary angle to this angle right here? You obviously wouldn't choose this right angle because this right angle plus this angle is way more than 90. So you're going to choose the other angle next to it that adds to it to make 90. So another thing I want to go over is how you name your angles. So in your homework and on your exams, you'll see something like A, B, C, D, and E. And it's going to ask you, name the angle that is complementary to CBD. And the angle that is complementary to CBD is angle DBE. You can write this as well. So this is equal to angle EBD. We already went over this in class, but again, this is review. So if they're asking you for complementary angles, it's asking for angles that add up to 90 degrees. If it's asking for supplementary angles, it's angles that add up to 180. One more thing to note, when it's asking you name an angle that is supplementary to angle A. Well, angle A is 90 degrees. So how many degrees do you need to get you 180? Let's see. 90. So the angle that is supplementary to angle A is angle B. That is possible. So angle A and angle B are supplementary. I'm just going to put SUP. One more thing that I forgot to mention about complementary angles is that when you have angles that are complementary, those 2 angles or 3 angles, it can be more than 2, they're all going to be acute because they're all less than 90 degrees. So that brings me to my next portion of this video. So acute angles or acute triangles are angles that are less than 90 degrees or angles in a triangle that are less than 90 degrees. So we write less than like this, remember, less than. So angles that are less than 90 degrees. Now, obtuse angles are angles that are greater than 90 degrees, and right angles are angles that are equal to 90 degrees. So if something is acute, let's say that this angle is acute, that means that this angle right here has to be less than 90 degrees. If it's an angle that looks like this, it's an obtuse angle, and that is greater than 90 degrees. And if it's a right angle, it's an angle that looks like a part of a square, and that equals 90 degrees. If you're presented a problem that looks like this, you know that this angle is a right angle. So you know that this angle plus x has to equal 90 degrees. So you can write an equation, and you can write 47.6 plus x equals, how many degrees is a right angle? 90 degrees. And now you would just solve for x. You isolate the variable, get rid of this positive 47.6. So what's the opposite of positive 47.6? It's a negative or minus 47.6. What I do on one side, you do to the other. So in order to subtract these, you have to add a decimal to the 90. And you have to borrow. So this turns into 8. This turns into 10, but you need to borrow from 10, so that turns to 9, and then you have your 10. 10 minus 6 is 4, 9 minus 7 is 2, 8 minus 4 is 4. You bring that decimal place down, so x is equal to 42.4. And if you add these two together, it should give you 90 degrees. If it does not give you 90 degrees, you did something wrong. Now let's say, for example, you have a question that is a straight line. How many degrees is a straight line? You should know this. It's 180 degrees. Now let's say it presents you angles that look like this. 4x and 64 degrees. I want you to notice that 64 degrees is an acute angle, and this represents it very well. This is an acute angle, and you know because it's less than 90 degrees. So now, you know that every straight line adds up to 180 degrees, so that's one part of your equation. Now they give you two angles, so these two angles have to be added together, and they have to be set equal to 180. Now you can solve for x. But remember, let's say you get, and I don't know what the answer is, let's say you get x is equal to, 12. Remember, I'm not saying that this is the answer, I haven't solved it yet. This is not your final answer. Your final answer is going to be this number plugged in to this number. Okay? I think the question in your book is just asking you, solve for x. But on the state test, it's going to ask you, what's the measure of this angle? It's not going to ask you just for x. So do the extra mile, or go the extra mile and solve for that. So again, I'm not saying that this is equal to 12. I haven't solved it. Don't. Solve it on your own and tell me what x is. So remember when we celebrated Pi Day, pi is in regards to circles, and the basic principles of circles are their diameter, their radius, and their circumference. So just by looking at these pictures, you know that half of the circle is the diameter, and half of the diameter is the radius. So half of this is the radius, and double this is the diameter. Something to know. So if a question gives you, oh, the diameter equals 10. What's the radius? The radius is going to be half of the diameter. So what's half of 10? 5. So now let's say the radius is 3. And they ask you, what's the diameter? Well, the diameter is just double that. So what's double 3? 6. So now let's say they're asking you about the circumference. So remember, the circumference, oh, apparently if I move the screen, that's what happens. So the circumference of a circle is what is kind of like the perimeter. What is the outside? So the circumference of a circle is 2 times pi times r. We know our radius is 3 in this case, so we can just do circumference equals 2 times 3.14, because that's what pi equals, times 3. Put this into a calculator and tell me what the circumference is.